good to go. How are you?
Good.
Good. So today we're going to talk about part 4. Maybe we can explain what the situation is. Where are we sitting right now, Des? We're in the studio.
Yeah, we're sitting in the studio, yeah.
But what are they doing? What's all around us?
Junk.
All kinds of crap.
Half a school of chairs and
Various other things, right?
rubbish show. Yeah.
So we've had to squeeze in, but I think we've done a fine job. So let's start. Last time we talked about the 60s and New York City and then into Vietnam. We talked about that as well.
Right.
Tell me about the 70s. What happened when you came back from Vietnam? When you returned from Vietnam, you were there for 6 years, then what happened?
Yeah, well, I came to Canada in 1976.
You keep talking. I'm going to check the level. So keep
Okay,
talking.
yeah.
1976, yeah?
Yeah. But 1970, I was with CBS News. Came back from the war, and then Vietnam War was the longest war in American history. We came back from that.
And are you glad you came to Canada? Was Canada a good move for you?
Yeah, it was a great move, Gary. It was just I just got married to my first wife,
What was her name?
Kirsten,
Kirsten, and she was from where?
in Denmark.
She was Danish.
Yeah,
And where did you marry?
and we had a beautiful house on the island of Bornholm.
Where is that, in Finland?
But I can't talk about that because I got my daughter is not from my first wife.
No, I understand
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
it's part of your history, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
The house you can talk about, and that's long gone, I'm sure, right?
No, I'm sure it's still there.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
They call that the Easter Sea
The Easter Sea.
in Danish.
Now let's just talk about today for a minute. This weekend you went to whose wedding was this?
I can
weekend?
speak Danish. I taler fin dansk. I speak good Danish.
Is that what that means?
Yeah, hvordan går det?
Wow.
That means which way are you going, which way are you traveling.
And how do you say to someone, gee, Gary's very attractive looking?
Gary meget godt.
Oh, not awesome hot.
No.
Now, this weekend you went to a wedding.
That's correct,
Whose
yeah.
wedding was that?
Yeah, that was the wedding of Tony Berman.
Your good friend Tony.
Yeah.
And you said who was there? All sorts of CBC people, right?
Dozens and dozens and dozens of people. It was absolutely great, Gary. Just totally great.
The interesting thing is that if you had never come to Canada, you wouldn't have known any of those folks.
That's
probably.
right. That's right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would
Yeah.
have been a whole different world, though, eh?
Totally.
So, 1976, you came to Canada?
No. I came in 1976. I came to Toronto.
Oh, to Toronto.
Yeah.
Now, why did you come to Toronto? Because you were in Montreal and you were the.
I started off, as you know, I started off in Toronto, and I started off in Montreal actually, yeah, and then so.
Now, why Toronto then? What was it?
It just seemed like it just seemed like a good thing.
Because it seems to me like every time, like when you're telling me your story, like you moved to Canada because it seemed like a good opportunity.
Right.
To Montreal. Then you moved to New York because that was a good opportunity.
Right.
And then you took what was the first place you worked for in American news? Was it ABC or NBC?
NBC first, for local NBC, just for a short period.
Then you moved to?
Then I moved to ABC and so on.
And CBS?
It was alphabet soup, yeah. And I ended up at CBS in I came to Canada for the final time from New York, 1976.
Okay.
And I was with CBS.
Okay. So you came to Canada, worked in Montreal, went down to the States, and then came back to Canada.
Correct.
Okay. And what was the job you took in Canada in 1976?
It was a great job. I was in charge of, the very first job I had was coming back. I was in charge of, excuse me, guy. I was in charge of Montreal.
From Toronto?
No, when I came back from the United States, what happened was they offered me a job to be in charge of everything, drama, everything.
Wow.
So when I got to, this is in Montreal,
yeah.
When I got there, I said, what's the budget for drama, by the way? It was called Saturday Night Drama.
Yeah.
And he said $6,000. And I said, I just noticed that the newsroom is in the basement. Not much we can do about that right now, but it's underfunded.
Yeah.
And I talked to Dave Knapp, the the head of news. So he said, I'm going to collapse the drama. The people who work on drama, producers, and not the actors, but the producers, will offer them a job in the newsroom. Anyone who wants a job in the newsroom, they can have it.
Before we go on, can you just push your glasses up so I
Right.
can see your eyes just a little bit better?
Right.
There you go.
Right.
Beautiful eyes. Okay, great. How do you say beautiful eyes in Finnish?
Daily onya.
Oh, very good, very good. So when you came to Canada, was it a lot different from New York? Did you ever find yourself thinking, gee, I miss the excitement of New York and the American networks?
Yeah, you do miss the excitement, but it was so much better to be in Canada. First, my thought was in coming back to, when I first came back, so this is not too confusing. I came back to Montreal because Montreal, I ran everything drama. I collapsed the drama, gave the $6,000 to Dave Knapp, then the head of the newsroom, right?
Yeah.
And then I moved to Toronto after I remarried a second time to Mary Elena.
Right, and Toronto was a better city for you?
It was, they're all good cities, Gary. It just was, my circumstances were. It was a lot better than, New York, I'm still in touch with all my friends at CBS.
Yeah.
There isn't a day goes by. But I'm glad I'm not living in New York. Lately it's gone through hell, but it's a tough town to work in and live in.
Tough in what way, Desmond?
Tough because it's the biggest city on the Eastern Seaboard.
Right.
It's violent. I lived in Queens. It was frightening going home sometimes.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd hear gunfire and that kind of stuff?
I saw a lot of. I saw violence in Vietnam. I didn't see any violence, fortunately, in New York City. I didn't see it, but it was there every day, and it's today.
Yeah. And then, so you have no regrets leaving that? And
None.
didn't want to raise a family there? Was that kind of the plan?
Correct.
Okay. So then you wanted to raise a family in Canada?
Yeah.
But you did go back to get married in New York. Why did you?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all our friends were there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So we got married. It cost me $18
Yeah. And where did you get married?
at the at New York City Hall.
And what were you wearing?
Brand
new suit, were you not?
I was wearing a brand new suit, correct, which I still have.
Yeah, because I looked at those pictures that we have, and you mentioned in several notes on the bottom about your new suit. Had you not bought new suits before that?
You know, I bought so many clothes, and I've got a wardrobe that would cost thousands of dollars now, but at the time I bought it, there weren't thousands of dollars.
Like your Rolex watch, right?
Correct.
You bought that where?
I always had it in New York. I gave it to my son, Nick.
But you bought it when you were coming back from Vietnam?
Yeah, I did. That's correct, yeah.
Do you remember what you paid for it?
No.
$250? You told me that.
Well, in those days, yeah, that would be about $1,000 or whatever it is today for the Rolex watch.
Yeah, but everybody had them, so you had to have one? Is that why you bought it, or just a good watch?
No, everybody has a watch. I just don't like them anymore.
No, see, you're not...
right,
hold
exactly.
up your wrists, we see there's no watch.
No watch, absolutely not.
But your ring, you're still wearing your ring.
Yeah, I'm still wearing my ring.
Yeah, the Traveler.
The Traveler,
So
correct.
you came to Toronto, and what were you doing? What were you working for a show? I know you were working for Marketplace at some point, but what was your job in Toronto when you got here?
Well, I did. I produced, Sunday Morning.
Oh, the Sunday Morning.
I did. I produced Sunday Morning. Is
that a TV program?
Yeah. It was it's just gone off the air, but with Carol and Evan Solomon.
Who was the anchors when you were doing it?
Can't remember.
No remembering.
No.
How long did you have the show for?
A couple of years.
Did you like that show?
I did. I really enjoyed it. The people are very dedicated. Sunday morning's a really good time because of the talk shows. On all the networks. So the CBC had it. Why it's dropped it now, dropped Evan Solomon, I can't fathom it. CBC does great things and it does some pretty stupid things.
Yeah. Now, what time was the program on Sunday?
On Sunday morning is, when I did it?
Yeah.
It was 11 o'clock.
In the morning. 11 till when?
Till noon.
So,
It fitted in with all the, the competition was then, as it would be now, would be all the American talk shows, news talk shows.
Right.
The analysis at that time of the day.
So I guess you weren't going to church on Sunday morning.
No.
No time for that, eh? And the thing with Sunday Morning is, did you plan the guests? What was your part in that program? What did you do?
Well, when you run a program, you do everything. You set up the program. What are the topics? You also in television journalism, it's a mutual business. You have to get along with everybody. If Evan Solomon said he had another idea, then
you would listen to it.
Of course I would.
Right. And then, is that what makes a good manager in your mind? Someone who listens?
Absolutely. Listening is 70% of the job. Talking is 30%, unless you're the anchor.
But sometimes you have to be tough, like when you close the drama department down, right?
Sometimes you have to be. That's correct.
Probably a lot of people were not happy with that decision, were they?
No, well, you have to cope with unhappiness. It's like a balancing wheel. When somebody's unhappy, somebody else is very happy.
Hold it up a little higher so we can see the
Yeah,
balancing wheel.
it's like a balancing wheel. Yeah. When somebody's up there, they're happy, and when they're down there, they're unhappy.
Yeah. But then at the end of the day, you have to do what you think is right. Is that
correct.
Also correct?
Totally so.
Yeah. So you ran Sunday Morning for a couple of years, and then why did you leave Sunday Morning?
Search me, I don't know.
Just a time for change?
Well,
maybe?
one thing that I've always done, Gary, is write.
Yeah.
And maybe we can talk about that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Let's do that as well. So you're writing at the same time?
Yes, and I should say when I began, and I think we talked about that last week, but when I began, I worked for the Manchester Evening News.
Yes. And
I was just rereading my diary from that period. I found my diary, which is extremely interesting. Mm-hmm. It was my very first job after university, mm-hmm. and I got a job in the newsroom, Manchester Evening News, I ran copy. I used to run the copy from the printing room to the printing room from the editorial room.
That's right, because we did talk about in previous weeks about how your early days in newspaper.
Yeah.
So you always had a love for writing. Is that the basic?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you told me last week that you've been clipping articles for years. Is that right?
I still clip it.
Yeah.
They go by with that. As my daughter says, Dad, all the paper's all over the floor, right? So I pick it up.
But you tear out.
The last thing I did before coming here was clip something.
And what did you clip?
I clipped a story on Sotomayor, the new justice of the Supreme Court.
And what was interesting about that story?
Well, for one thing, she's had an incredibly interesting life, and a lot of people wonder how she's going to do as a judge. She's very tough. Mm-hmm. She's somewhat unusual, but she's in the tradition of the great justices of the Supreme Court.
Do you think she'll do okay?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So what? But then there's lots of stories about her. So why that particular story?
Well, there's never lots about a new Supreme Court justice.
No,
Not many, no.
Michael Jackson, what about that? Lots about Michael Jackson?
Yeah, to me, I could have thrown up. It was too much with Michael Jackson. I feel sorry, but he was dead. Why they keep him around for 10 more days?
Yeah.
I mean, he's still dead, right?
Yeah.
And as of this moment, I'm talking to you, he's dead as a door knocker, so.
So all the talking didn't bring him back. Now, so then you're writing, is that your real passion, Desmond? What's your great love in life? Television, or, because we talked, I think what comes through the videos, it's certainly to me, is that you had a love for print and writing, but you saw the power of pictures. But you still also appreciate the power of words, right?
Of course, yeah.
And you were writing for who? So who are some of the people you've written for over the years?
You mean the papers that I've written for?
Yeah.
Certainly written for the New York Times.
Yeah. The fun section, lifestyles. Where have you written for that?
I've written the editorial in the 60s. I had the cover story. I should have brought. I can bring
We can
the.
show clips of that. We can cut them in.
Yeah.
We'll scan that in.
Yeah, I made a cover story about where television was going in the 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. And then the Smithsonian Magazine?
Smithsonian Magazine. I have written for the Smithsonian. In fact, I just submitted a story that I want to do.
Oh, good for you.
On what, you should say?
On what?
Typewriters.
Really?
The history of typewriters.
There's an exhibit at the airport, a history of typewriters exhibit. if you ever want to
So
go see it.
yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
But my typewriter weighs, which is an Olivetti, as you know, I'd say it weighs about 8 pounds.
And did you
Pretty tough. I hacked that all around Vietnam.
That was it, eh?
Yeah,
All the stories that came off of there, eh?
yeah.
And so you wrote, who else did you write for? Time Magazine, Life, any of those folks?
No, I didn't write for them. But I obviously I worked next to those people.
Right, when you were out in the field.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're looking for stories, what makes a good print story versus a good TV story?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Well, obviously, for TV, you need some kind of pictures.
Right.
With a caveat, if it's breaking news, it doesn't matter what some kind of pictures. You've just got to get to the story.
Right.
But what makes a good story? It has to have heart. I'd say number one, accuracy. H for heart, and it has to speak to the times or to the time. For example, a story that everybody said I couldn't do with the CBC when I was doing the Sunday Morning was I couldn't do 9/11 because it happened 4 days ago. When I suggested it, and said it would have been great. I'd have been 4 days ago, but
they suggested it was too late to do.
Yeah, but I didn't. I used my own money. I went down to New York City, and I interviewed everybody I could